There are no particular nuances in this recipe that you should pay close attention to. Nevertheless, we look very carefully, we do not overdo it. I'll keep the loud parts in the description. We watch, enjoy, subscribe and leave. I'm using a cutout for today's recipe, but a thin or thick edge works too. The key is in the cooking process. We remove the films to keep the meat clean. We don't need these films, we get rid of them. And we dry the beef as much as possible. I cut a flat piece, about 20 centimeters. This will be our future divider. And the remaining pieces, such unattractive ones, I use, for example, in tartar or other dishes. I want to give the meat a crust, but I don't want to fry it on a high heat to coat everything in oil. That's why I take a regular torch and run it over the meat until it's lightly charred. We do the same thing on all sides. Remember the torsional parts. The meat has slightly released its juice, and the spices have adhered well to this juice. I will only use 2, salt and freshly ground pepper. Don't skimp on pepper and salt, as some of it will fall off and we won't notice it. Naturally, we sprinkle as generously as possible from the side. Many use thyme, rosemary, garlic, but our sauce will be so strong that all this story will simply be lost. Therefore, I do not advise to make your accent on this, and use a minimum of spices. Next, we need a counter. I lined it with parchment paper, as the meat will give juice. I am flipping the meat. As you understood, it's still raw inside, and I need it to be 63 to 65 degrees in the thickness of the product. And how am I going to achieve this? Very simple, I will use a probe. Such a probe can be bought on any marketplace for about 1,000 rubles. The thermoprobe goes into the center of the meat 21 to 22 degrees. Now, inside it is 63 degrees. This is the temperature at which I was able to calmly get it out of the oven. And this will mean that it is ready. The oven temperature is 180 degrees, mode top-bottom. For those viewers who do not have a thermoprobe, I will tell you how much time it took for my oven to cook at 180 degrees, this piece of meat. A few words about the sauce. The sauce with tuna is based on mayonnaise. You can use store-bought mayonnaise, but we will make it ourselves, homemade. And first of all, we will need 3 yolks. Separate the whites from the yolks, and we transfer the yolk to a bowl for mixing. Freshly ground pepper, a few good turns. Salt, also 3-4 turns. Ground mustard, a dessert spoon with a slide. A teaspoon of lemon juice for acidity. This will be enough. We put the bowl on the scales, zero it out. For this amount of yolks, I will need approximately 150 grams of oil. I will use a 2-to-1 ratio of vegetable to olive. That is, olive will be 1/3, as it can be bitter if overdone. And I pour 50 milliliters straight along the wall. And vegetable turns out to be 100 grams. Now, one subtlety on the whisk, we put it on the bottom of the glass and do not lift it. Beat until the mayonnaise starts to thicken. After the lumps have appeared, you can slowly start adding oil. Look, this is exactly the result I was aiming for. Next, I will use anchovies. I will need 5 or 6 fish, no more. And by the way, I consider this ingredient more as a spice, a flavor enhancer, not a product. If you remember, Caesar's sauce without anchovies is not even worth considering. Next, tuna. I have natural chunks of tuna in its own juice. Together with the liquid, I put everything in a blender cup. Blend everything until smooth. The sauce turns out to be very light in fat, similar to sour cream or even closer to kefir. All that's left is to check for salt. Everything is okay with the salt. I would add a little vinegar, also a teaspoon of lemon juice. That will be enough. We also pierce and wait for the meat. We get the cooked meat. I want to draw attention to the fact that very little liquid came out of the meat. As you could understand, I didn't set our thermometer to 63 degrees, but to 60 degrees. Because when the temperature is distributed, when the meat will rest, the temperature will already be 62 degrees, and the meat lies just a couple of minutes. And if we had immediately set 63 to 65 and pulled out the meat when it had already reached the temperature, then in the end there would already have been 70 degrees there in the end. And to cold dishes, to cold snacks, so it is desirable to cool the meat completely. But we don't have time to wait, so we will start cutting and serving in a short time. We transfer the meat to the board, and now we will cut it. Let's see what's inside. Look at this pink, excellent meat. We cut it into such thin slices, as much as we can allow ourselves. Just look at this juiciness. We randomly lay out meat pieces, filling the bowl's bottom. I forgot to refrigerate the sauce, though it could have been cooled. The final ingredient is capers. Many put capers in the sauce, but I think separately it adds acidity and stands out. In my opinion, it's tastier this way. I can't wait to try it. I take the first piece, add capers and sauce, and put it in my mouth. The meat is very tender, very juicy, and the sauce really strongly gives off tuna. That's why this combination probably is not for nothing that Italians love it so much. They have introduced this dish practically all over the world. This dish looks festive, but in fact, if without bolts, we spent 1 hour of time, 40 minutes no more. And by the way, I promised to say how much time the sauce took to prepare to bring the meat to such a state, about 30 minutes. On this delicious note, my friends, I bid you farewell. I thank you for watching. Like this video, share it with your friends, and don't be afraid to experiment. Bye.